Good afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, I've been at DSPO for almost 5 years. And prior to that, I had the pleasure of supporting all NAVAIR program offices for about 15 years. I was the DMSMs lead at NAVAIR. Now I have the pleasure of managing the parts and DMSMS management programs for all of DoD. Best job ever. I have 20 slides today and only about 15 minutes. So what I hope to do is to get you excited about our way forward, get you so excited that you'll message me wanting to know more, or connect me to the DMSMS and parts management folks in your organization, so that I can get them up to speed with our new strategic parts and material lifecycle management strategy, which I'm happy to announce is a combination of both of my programs. So slide 2. As most of you know, today's weapon systems are characterized by rapidly changing technology. We have accelerated timelines. We're facing service life extensions. There's been an increased use of commercial off-the-shelf COTS assemblies. Some of our parts are manufactured offshore, so we need to consider the source of supply and whether the parts are qualified for the application in which they're being used. Our systems are plagued with diminishing manufacturing sources, material shortages issues, counterfeit parts. Jim was just talking about that, have been detected in our supply chain. We also need to consider reduction of hazardous substances such as lead-free restrictions. And really another consideration is the environment in which the part will be used in. For example, a part used in a land-based aircraft might not be suitable for use in ship-based aircraft that operate in severe marine environments and are more exposed to corrosion. So all of these factors have increased risk for DoD weapon systems and equipment. So the need to have an effective parts management, parts selection program is greater than ever before. So next slide. The parts management that I'm speaking about is really parts selection. So it's not spares, it's not inventory or sustainment per se. Our focus is on selecting parts wisely in design. Parts management is an attempt to streamline the selection of preferred or commonly used parts during design. This process determines the most optimum parts while considering the many factors that affect program outcomes. Our comprehensive parts management program is cradle to grave management of these parts. When you have part standardization and replacing numerous similar parts with one common part, that results in larger part type buys because the common parts are used in multiple applications. Part standardization also helps avoid the increased cost of maintaining technical data, storing, tracking, and distributing multiple parts. And when systems share common components, repair time is shorter because parts are more likely to be on hand. Using common components simplifies logistics support because fewer parts are stocked, and you get savings in procuring, testing, warehousing, and transporting parts. Using preferred parts helps avoid expenses and delays of designing and developing parts, and the issues of acquiring a new item with no available history or documentation. And this often reduces the time between the purchase request and the receipt of the part. Preferred parts reduce risk and improve the chances of equipment reliability. They have a history of proven reliability, history of withstanding rigorous testing, and performing at stated levels. Their use decreases the number of part failures, reducing the number of maintenance actions, and potentially precluding failures or loss of life. Next slide. DMSMS, diminishing manufacturing sources and material shortages, is when you go to buy an item, a part, you need, and you can't because the manufacturer has decided to discontinue production of that item. Now you're running around like your hair is on fire trying to figure out what to do. While traditionally thought of applying this as applying to electronic items, it's important to know that a DMSMS issue can happen with any item within the system, including software, non-electronic components. DMSMS issues are caused by many factors. We've seen it caused by low volume market demand, new or evolving technology. There could be a change to detection limits, toxicity values, and regulations related to chemical and materials. Another aspect of DMSMS is when an item, although still available, no longer functions as intended because of requirements changed to the system. And this is what's called functional obsolescence. Any of these situations may endanger ongoing production capability for the life cycle support of the system. Next slide. So historically, large DoD systems can require a decade or more to develop and then have fielded life that spans decades. Yet the life cycles of items are brief by comparison. And you can see on this slide, 18 months for COTS and electronic items before they go obsolete, about 5 years for COTS software. And as mentioned before, you have the environmental and regulatory restrictions that can happen at any time as well. And because DoD systems life cycles are longer than technology life cycles, DMSMS issues are inevitable. DoD can't afford to be reactive in this area. The reactivity may lead to a combination of schedule delays, readiness degradations, and higher costs. Next slide, which is slide 6. What I just described is what we call risk-based proactive DMSMS management in our SC22 DoD DMSMS Guidebook. When we load our parts list into our DMSMS predictive tools for electronic parts and do market surveys for our non-electronic parts and forecast when DMSMS issues are going to arise, what we're doing there is increasing our window of opportunity and buying us time to make more cost-effective decisions. This gives us more time to consider all applicable options. It minimizes out-of-cycle redesigns in the future. It also helps to eliminate schedule impacts, increases operational availability, helps control total ownership costs. And to be honest, this and our ability to verify and validate and solve DMSMS issues the OEMs reported really is how I was able to get buy-in from program offices to spend the money on DMSMS management, especially since DMSMS is inevitable. It's going to happen, so why not plan for it instead of waiting until you try to buy a part you need and you can't, which is being reactive. You know, but I've been doing this for a while now, and I think that we can do better than this. I believe that even when we're being proactive, we're still just waiting for our problems to occur. Although, you know, the crystal ball in DMSMS management is fuzzy, so no matter how proactive you try to be, obsolescence will still occur unexpectedly. Since our obsolescence tools aren't 100% accurate, or we may not have up-to-date parts lists for all of our systems. So how about thinking more strategically? Slide 7, please. As long as I can remember, we've recommended that program offices ensure that they have a DMSMS management plan, a team, tools, and are performing obsolescence health assessments during PDR, preliminary design review, right around the milestone B, to ensure that a mitigation plan is in place for current or near-term obsolescence issues. You know, as I mentioned on the previous slide, life cycles of many items that make up a DoD system designs are brief. So I recall telling many program offices, the minute you think about building something, you should start planning for obsolescence. We also recommended that language requiring these health assessments and mitigation plans be put in contracts. And I recall, you know, about 15 to 20 years ago, getting pushback and being told that we didn't have a final parts list at this stage and that these assessments would be difficult to do. I remember reminding everyone that we did have a preferred parts list, or at least a preliminary parts list that we could run through our DMSMS predictive tools. This would help us identify if DMSMS has already been designed in, or if parts were forecasted to become obsolete within 3 to 5 years. We also recommend that DMSMS subject matter experts be involved in the systems engineering technical reviews, at PDR, at CDR, critical design review, to help forecast, verify, and mitigate obsolescence issues. This should be done for new acquisitions and also for all redesigns. And now with the rewrite of the DoD 5000, we now have a variety of pathways to consider, not just the major capability pathway that you see on this slide. Next slide. Did we skip a slide? Or maybe they're out of order. What's the next slide, Dave? Yeah, I think I skipped it. So anyway, there's a missing slide. But on that slide, it was just a diagram of the new adaptive acquisition framework. But regardless, the point that I wanted to make on that slide was, regardless of what acquisition pathway is selected, ideally, the time to start a parts and DMSMS management is when designs are being evaluated or for use or being created. This really enables the disciplines to have the most positive impact on the total systems of life cycle health. When implementing parts management and DMSMS procedures for these pathways, we should advise that planning for parts and DMSMS begin as soon as feasible after the acquisition pathway authorization. So in light of all of that, we know that early design decisions impact sustainment. I recall when I began supporting program offices at NAVAIR, systems engineers were designing in obsolescence in initial designs and redesigns all the time. You know, I also remember how difficult it was for logisticians and DMSMS subject matter experts to be included in systems engineering technical reviews. DMSMS is one of the many product support design considerations in the Defense Acquisition Guide, and design decisions made early in a program have substantial impact. You know, on operations and support costs later in the program. So with all that said, and you can go to that DMSMS Resilient Design slide. I think it may have been, yep, that one. So with all that said, I think we should be creating DMSMS resilient designs to avoid DMSMS issues altogether. You know, in addition to delaying the occurrence of DMSMS issues that cannot be prevented, this is what I mean by DMSMS resilience. It's a property of a design that reduces the likelihood of near-term DMSMS issues and increases the probability of a quick recovery when issues do occur. So DMSMS resilience is achieved by selecting long life cycle items. We need to avoid single sources of supply when we can, use open system architecture and designs and other techniques. We also need to plan better and have future system modification technology refresh plans and roadmaps. And this also needs to happen way before Milestone A. This needs to happen pre-Milestone A, or whatever its equivalent is in the new adaptive acquisition framework I just spoke about. On the next slide. So all of this needs to happen, right? Pre-Milestone A or its equivalents, as I just mentioned. And I don't have time today to expand on these, but there are a number of pre-Milestone A events that are listed on this slide, where parts management and DMSMS experts can aid in developing robust part selection and management procedures that will positively affect availability, reliability, and performance of parts throughout the life cycle. Not considering parts management in the design phase will be a driving force for DMSMS and obsolescence issues later in the life of the system. We have a whole other briefing that expands on each of these if anyone is interested. And that is what I mean by thinking more strategically. It's early in the life cycle. In design, we need to ensure we're not designing in obsolescence or a bunch of other problems that will cost us a lot of money in sustainment. So let's design for sustainability or supportability. We can do this by ensuring that we are requiring industry to have a solid parts management program and that we have visibility and oversight of the parts that are chosen. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to switch gears just a little because when giving this presentation and my recommendations, I oftentimes get asked, well, what about those legacy platforms that are in sustainment? What can we do to mitigate obsolescence issues since we didn't consider DMSMS management in design, nor put parts or DMSMS management requirements on our contracts? So many of us are maintaining aging fleet. Our B-52s are as old as 1952 Cadillacs, A-10s as old as 1977 Chevy Caprices, B-1s, as old as our 1986 Ford Taurus. You get the point. So from a DMSMS perspective, really technology management is one of the most important aspects of supply chain management throughout the life cycle. This approach is often referred to as modernization through spares or continuous modernization, technology insertion or refreshment. This enables life cycle sustainment strategy that minimizes the cost of resolving future obsolescence issues while incorporating state-of-the-art technologies to increase reliability, lower sustainment requirement costs, and increase warfighting capability to meet evolving requirements. So as you're modernizing your systems or sustaining your systems, you should have a proactive DMSMS or parts management program. It's not too late for you at all. Next slide. So you should be doing all of these things in sustainment, not just waiting for issues to pop up and fires to be extinguished. You should be establishing a DMSMS program, monitoring your parts, assessing the impact of the issues, determining resolutions, making sure that they're implemented. This process is explained in great detail in the SD22, DMSMS Guidebook, and 2 of our DAU courses if you'd like more training. The next slide is an example of a DMSMS health assessment. It integrates the estimated obsolescence dates, usage rates, items due and stocks on hand. If you'll go to the next slide, Dave, to highlight when an item or assembly will no longer be supportable. This guides the program's overall technology management strategy, plan and roadmaps to synchronize efforts to address technology trends of requirement-driven product upgrades. So there it is. So I can't stress enough that incorporating a technology management strategy, influenced by DMSMS health assessments into design, acquisition, and sustainment activities really is the best practice to reduce further DMSMS costs and readiness impacts throughout the life cycle. On this slide, you see the many different types of resolution options that exist for resolving an obsolescence issues. These resolutions fall into 3 broad categories: existing material, substitutes, and redesign. If you'd like to see the definition and examples of each of these, the SD22 DoD DMSMS Guidebook, I would recommend that you look at that. The next slide, I just mentioned the SD22 a few times. It describes DMSMS management programs best practices. We're in the process of updating it to move beyond the robust, proactive DMSMS management to strategic DMSMS management that we've been talking about. We redid the policy section. We added working capital fund information. We have a new guidance for budgeting, a new software DMSMS management guidance section, just to name a few things that we've changed. And my goal is to have this new version published by the end of November. And I provided you with a link. Also, we just published the SD26 DMSMS Contract Language Guide, which gives you DMSMS contract language examples to use under different circumstances throughout the life cycle. It also includes procedurals and DIDs that you can use. The link is there as well. And we've adopted an international standard, IEC 62402, which is titled Obsolescence Management. And that can be used in conjunction with SAE standard 0016 for establishing DMSMS management requirements. The next slide is the SD19, which is the Parts Management Guide. This provides a detailed procedures for developing and implementing a parts management program. It's designed to be used in conjunction with MIL Standard 3018, and that's a standard practice document that provides the requirements for the implementation of an effective parts management program. And it includes sample contract language as well, and the links are on the slide. The next slide is a list of DAU courses that I recommend for all parts management and DMSMS practitioners. I'm happy to say that we finalized and got approval for a new DAU parts and material lifecycle management credential, which will include all of these courses, and folks will be able to get this credential starting September of 2021. The next slide is the DAU parts management and DMSMS knowledge sharing portals that we've designed to share information, tools, policy, guidance, and training. All you need is a DAU ID to access, and that's fairly easy to get. And then my last slide, last but not least, I chair a parts and material management working group. It's a combination of the old parts management and DMSMS working groups. During this working group, we champion proactive part selection and DMSMS management best practices. We're currently working on a dozen strategic objective projects to either fill gaps that we've identified, fix or better understand processes that make us more efficient, or create new products that help us do our jobs better. Most important one, I believe, is the new DoD DMSMS management instruction that will be published any day now. It's in the last stage of coordination. I'll also begin formal coordination of a new DoD DMSMS manual as well. So if you're interested in learning more about what the other projects are, just email me and I'll send you the information. I have a parts management and a DMSMS lead from each service, MDA and DLA, who make up my advisory group. If you need me to connect you with them, let me know. The working group is open to both government and industry. We've been hosting monthly meetings, sometimes twice a month, since COVID hit in March. And I plan to continue to do that until we can meet in person again, and maybe even after. The attendance really has been phenomenal. Over 700 participants for one of them. And if this all goes well and we can travel again, I'm planning on hosting the 2021 Parts and Material Lifecycle Management Conference the week of July 12th in Orlando, Florida. So that is it from me, and thank you so much for your time.
All right, thank you, Tim, Jim, and Robin. For the sake of time, we're going to forgo the Q&A session right now, and we'll table the questions that have been provided. I think each of the speakers from DSPO received questions. We'll table those for the town hall tomorrow or answer them directly in the meantime.